Any look?
Ryan, let me see. One more thing here. It just keeps pushing to the old live that we did. I believe we are live now. Okay, we are live now. I'm now listening to myself 5 seconds ago. I'm going to close that. Thanks everybody for your patience. Apologies, we had a little a Zoom hiccup pushing to the wrong stream. So if you were over listening to our stream from June, my apologies. We're going to start this over, and welcome to the stream. Thanks for hanging out. So, Jason, let's try this one more time. And before I forget, I'm going to make sure I'm just double check I'm recording, which I am. So, Jason Bay, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the channel. For those listening on the podcast, hopefully we cut out all the stuff with us struggling with the stream, but this is Jason. You might remember him from Blissful. He's no longer happy. He's changed his name to Outbound Squad. Help me understand the transition from Blissful to Outbound Squad.
Yeah, mostly I just thought the name sounded cooler. That was a really big thing. But the way that we got into the outbound space originally was, we were doing done for you prospecting. So we were basically similar to sort of how your customers engage with you. We weren't like an SDR for hire necessarily. It was more of a, hey, you have reps or individuals that you want cold outreach sent on behalf of, and you want us to book the appointment for you. So I created hundreds of email sequences, LinkedIn campaigns, and we would just run these on behalf of the client. And what I noticed through that time is that, especially with a lot of the larger sales teams that I work with now, they have people that are doing this stuff and they just aren't usually doing a very good job of it. So I've morphed more into training and coaching people that are doing it versus doing it for them. But the outbound game it's crazy how hard it has become since I started doing this. And it really wasn't that long ago. I mean, let's call it 10, 11 years ago, like with cold email. Like it's changed a lot since then. I mean, you could write an email that wasn't even really that customized outside of like a first name and a company. And that was kind of a cool thing to get, something that had merge tags in it. And then it was, hey, if I just reach out to Collin and say, really impressed with how long you've been at predictable revenue, all this other stuff, that was like, oh, wow, this person took some time to personalize it. And now most of the time, like the biggest challenge is one, getting the email to even hit the person's inbox. And then two, it's not just writing a good email. It's got to be really creative and stand out, and you got to do it a bunch and, that sort of stuff. And it's almost become a game more so in productivity and time management. And how can I get the most out of my time and get that personalization at scale thing that everyone talks about than it is about like your actual soft skills and like writing great email copy, let's say. And then your cold calling game right now is just, dude, just getting someone to pick up the phone when it's like a 3 or 4% pickup rate is like, if you don't got a dialer or something like that, it's almost unproductive for you to sit there and manually dial numbers. So yeah, it's really changed, to say the least.
100%. Like, I'm sorry to bother you. Would you mind pointing me in the direction of, I mean, that was 2012 to 2017. That was like our top performing email template across all campaigns. And then, you had to go omni-channel, and now you've got to be just a monster SDR. Like if you don't have something that's giving you mobile numbers, if you don't have something that's ensuring you've got strong email deliverability, and you don't have a parallel dialer, you are at a severe disadvantage to all the other SDRs that have those things, because they're able to hit their numbers with those things. Gone are the days where you and I could pick up a phone book and just do this for a couple hours and, make our numbers.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think that companies are forced to think of, there's a whole like it's not like doing more with less. It's almost like a doing less with less kind of thing. I see a big shift into reducing the tech stack too, where it's, hey, do we need a separate solution for rev intelligence and conversational intelligence, and then our sales engagement tool, and then a different place where we get data, and like how can we just kind of like simplify it And you know what? Do we have really good phone numbers? And are we using like an Orem, for example, for our dialing? And just focusing on that and looking at like the ROI in terms of like what can I create in terms of output for the individual? So it's like it's that juggling. Does it make more sense to pay for a license for this person to have a parallel dialer, or does it make more sense to hire another SDR? And I see a lot of organizations going more to the route of how do I just get like more done with the people that I have and reduce the amount of complexity in their tech stack, you know? And I think that's what something like predictable revenue, what's like really great about looking at like how you guys like piecemeal parts of it together. You know what I mean? Where it's like, how do we separate this task of outbound and not just say, you're going to do outbound. So you're going to get all of your own phone numbers. You're going to do all of your own research, account selection, contact selection. You're going to write your own messaging. You're going to make the calls. You're going to send it. It's almost like breaking apart some of the tasks and looking for places where you can get efficiencies. That's where I think AI is really going to be able to help too is, I don't know. I don't really see a world in the near future where AI is doing things for people on autopilot. I just don't really see that, where it's like, you can say, I want to reach out to people that fit this persona, start sending some emails for me and book some meetings. I think that's kind of what everyone's scared of right now. I just, the stuff that I'm seeing hasn't been that impressive in terms of like its ability to do stuff for you. And I guess that's what we're going to talk about today is, you know, what are the things that kind of help you, to use an analogy I've heard other people use, like more of the Iron Man suit, you know, sort of thing versus a robot doing something for you.
I'm just playing the song in my head. I'm not going to sing it out loud, but it's here.
Yeah.
100%. We're going to start today, not to just to lead off on the negative. Let's clear the air. Let's talk about some things that we don't love. And I don't want to say this to necessarily dump on any company in particular. I certainly think there are times and places for everything. And we're going to talk about a number of companies in the abstract. We might name drop a few companies. But I want you to know, I think for a large part, like most of the companies we talk about are doing good things. There's just going to be, we've got some nits to pick on, like what's actually real, what's valuable, what's just kind of sales and marketing spin. I want to lead off. Let's talk about Gong, and I'll open the gates. I love call recording.
Yeah.
I don't love paying $300 a month for call recording. It's not worth $300 a month. If I can do it in Zoom, the difference, like Zoom is free and it does transcriptions. So I'm going to pay $300 a month so that I don't have that little red icon in the top left-hand corner of the screen anymore. And I don't have the annoying voice. Like, to me, that's just not worth it. And I know people are listening. They're like, oh, but there's so much more you can do. But is it worth $300 per rep per year locked into an annual agreement? So I'm curious, Jason, where do you stand on the Gong and all the things that they can do? Some great, some less so.
Man, you're putting me on the spot, dude, with someone that's a previous customer of mine. I think where I see sales orgs get into trouble with tools like that is the adoption rate. And that's sort of the whole thing with tools like this, is that if I'm adding an extra tool to a rep's tool belt that they have to do extra stuff with, the extra stuff with is probably not going to happen. That's the great thing about a call recording tool, is it's gonna be working for you no matter what, right? It works regardless of user error for the most part, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, to answer your question directly, is it worth the $300 per seat? I mean, I think it depends on what the adoption is and how you're using it. So for example, you know, a topic I'm talking about a lot right now is multi-threading. How do we engage additional stakeholders? How do we pinpoint deals early in the sales cycle that are not multi-threaded and get on them early, especially to get executives involved? And Gong will tell you those things. It's got a great way to be able to detect through email communication and voice communication, and are these people hopping on calls? But I think the step that's missing with most of these types of tools is, well, what do I do with that information? Because it's just telling me something that I would have to look for that manually, but what do I do with that information? I think is really more what people need help with. And I see a future with AI, a not so distant future where, tell me that these deals are single threaded, but then tell me who I need to go connect with based on all of the other deals that I've closed. Because if there is a AI and machine learning component to this, I should be able to teach the tool through all of our Salesforce data
Mm.
how a closed won deal comes together in this particular type of segment and when people get involved and who those people typically are. So I want you to tell me who I should reach out to, and I want you to tee me up with some best practices on how to go about multi-threading it. So I think my answer depends to your question, is it worth it or not? Most of the people I see using these tools aren't really using them to their maximum like abilities, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I think I I haven't been a Gong user ever. I've been a Chorus user for a long time, and I remember talking to the founders, and I was like, "Yes, I love it." They're like, "What's your favorite feature?" Like the diarization, so I can see who's talking, and like that you colored it in. I was like, "That's what I care most about," because the way I'm
Yeah.
using the call recordings is for call coaching and call review and occasionally
Yeah.
call scoring, right? When I want to enforce best practices. I think when you think about the data and the information and the understanding that a tool or an AI system is going to need to have in order to make recommendations like that and like have a deep understanding, it seems to me like a leap too far based on what I can see the capabilities of. And don't get me wrong, there's some cool shit that we're going to talk about later on in the stream here that are um, super useful, very impactful using ChatGPT and a bunch of other tools. And I mean, I don't say this because I think Gong's doing anything wrong. One of the first companies I tried to start 12 years ago was something doing exactly what you're describing. And what we found was that the quality of the data wasn't there to feed the algorithm. And not just, it's not just that we were working with smaller companies. We had some larger data sets that we were looking at. You need a very high volume of very high quality and well-structured data. And so how many sales orgs do you know that have a very high volume of very well-structured data? And the answer is, at least the answer my answer is there aren't that many. You have to be fairly large and you have to have great process in place already in order to get there. And so the question I'd ask is, if you have a great team, so if we hold that those things are true, that in order to have amazingly structured data in your Salesforce, or in order to get value out of an AI or machine learning trained AI agent, however you want to describe it, if we assume that that is true, or sorry, if we assume that in order to do that, you need to have well-structured data and a well-trained team that's consistent, what advantage is the AI going to have over the existing sales team, the sales leadership group that you already have in place?
Yeah.
And when I think about it through those steps, I don't think that we're going to get to AI leading strategy of a deal. I think it'll be presenting like, oh, on average, you usually see like 3 buying influences. And one of those is like the VP of sales and these 3, but like, you don't need AI or machine learning to do that. You could just sit down and go, okay, let's look at the last 10 deals. Okay. It's
Yeah.
these 10 titles. Okay. So let's make sure we
Yeah.
got these 10 titles involved. There are these titles involved.
Yeah. I think like kind of where you're going is that AI is not going to be an extra brain. It's just going to be an extra set of hands, right? The extra set of hands is going to help you do something that, hey, I want you to tell me, because I don't want to look manually in each of these 50 deals,
Mhm.
which one of them are single threaded. I want you to like help spoon feed that to me in a report that I can then work through with the rep.
Mhm.
Like it's doing stuff like that. And that's a lot of like how you're using it too, where it's
Yeah,
basically multiplying what I can do, but it's not telling me how to necessarily do my job better. It's just getting me the information that I need and getting it really quickly.
100%. My favorite Salesforce Gong Chorus feature that doesn't exist yet is just an empty text box that where I can just type in and be like, build me a report on all my opportunities, from the last 30 days from this data source.
Yeah.
And also add in this and tell me what the close rates were. And I can just type that in, and the generative AI understands those commands, understands the Salesforce model or the Gong Chorus, et cetera, and then goes and does those things.
Yeah.
I know of a few people that are working on stuff like that, but nobody's quite there yet. And I think the number one biggest thing is like, hopefully Salesforce eventually builds that. But I think to be able to speak to your data, like literally just type to your data or type to Salesforce, Hey, Mr.
Yeah.
Einstein, can you do this for me? Let me ask you a few questions first, Colin. Okay, cool. There it is.
Yeah.
Like, I'm hypothesizing about the future. Let's talk about what are some other things that you don't like. So like I'll come out and say, I don't love the trying to get too fancy and like run. I don't think AI is quite to the point where it can run strategy on a deal yet. I think it can, to your point, it's a great second set of hands. It's a great reminder of, hey, this is how that call went. Here's a great summary. Here's a great next steps. Here's a great next actions, set of next actions. It can automate a ton of manual paperwork and admin stuff that sales folks don't love doing. And
Yeah.
let's be honest, don't do. If you look at any of the ops in my Salesforce, my medic completion rate, the rate at which I complete my medic fields in Salesforce right now is at a statistical low, all-time low.
I hear you on that. Yeah. I'm kind of mad at that right now too.
um, and we'll get to
Yeah.
we'll get to filling out medic in a minute, because I've got a prompt that I've actually been working on because I'm lazy and I don't like filling stuff in.
Yeah.
But what else? What other ideas have you seen out there that you don't love, that that are using AI, that it's maybe not the most helpful?
Well, my whole issue with AI writing email copy is that it needs good inputs.
Mm.
So the stuff that I have seen, again, I don't know. I was talking to like the product teams at some of these companies. And when I was demoing the platforms, it spit out some decent email copy when I was able to say, hey, I speak with VPs of sales at SaaS companies that are 250 to 1,000 employees. They usually have a sales org of like 50 to 200 reps. Their number one concern right now is account executives self-sourcing pipeline, because there's not as much to go around. They want to reduce reliance on SDRs and marketing. They want to increase pipeline coverage. And the other is around multi-threading. Deals are taking longer to close. They're engaging with more CFOs and additional stakeholders. Budget thresholds are lower, and they want to run tighter deal cycles. And when I gave it that information, it actually spit out an email that kind of scared me a little bit. I was like, oh, that's pretty good. That would have taken me a little while to write that. But I don't think that the problem is writing a good email. I think the problem that people have is knowing what their prospect will care about and what they're focused on. That's the part that I think you need to help people find, that I don't see any of these tools finding. And I'm not an expert on AI or engineering or any of that kind of stuff, but the thought that I kind of propose to them is, if the problem is not my writing abilities, and it's more about, hey, actually, most of these people doing outbound don't really understand what their prospects really care about right now. How can you help them get that information? And to me, that was something like, I should, like, if I uploaded 10 sales calls with this persona, I sent over some email copy that landed meetings. I uploaded some talk tracks that we put together. I've uploaded some marketing content. Could it extract all of that information? And I'm sure you could manually do this through ChatGPT and say, hey, what patterns do you see in here on what these people care about? Because these conversational intelligence tools, I'm like, how come this is not something that they do? They can tell you whether or not someone is using these specific words from this methodology, but that's just like telling you whether or not it showed up in the transcript, in these specific words. It's not telling you, hey, we hear these patterns, when they have the data. You know what I mean? That's the
Yeah.
part that I think the email copy, what I'm so afraid of is that we're just going to see so much more automated email copy now written by AI. That's just like, oh, it's not that good, and it's clogging up more inboxes. The only other thing that I would say too, I think that is with the conversational intelligence tools, is that, dude, the transcriptions, like in a lot of these tools, are not very accurate. Like, they mess up a lot of words, and I still haven't seen good transcription skills for people that are not native English speakers. So if someone has any kind of accent, like, the accent detection is really bad also. So I also question the validity and the quality of the data that these recording tools extract. But push a button and write email copy for me is, it's the worst.
100% agree. You're taking the easiest part of the process and being like, hey, look, a computer can do it. It's like, but To your point, if you know all these things, you don't need 11, 12 years of experience writing emails to pop out a good email.
Yeah.
You need help figuring out all the other stuff, which I think if I'm not an engineer, computer scientist. I know very, very little about AI. What I do know is the stuff that is extremely popular right now, ChatGPT, OpenAI, etc. These are large language models. Large language models. These are not large math models, which is probably not a thing. They're very good at generating language, understanding language, right? And so from a let's create copy perspective, they are very good at it. But when you think about the let's score this on a if I was doing a customer development interview with you and I said, hey, how important is getting help writing your email copy on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is that to you? Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with how your ability to currently do this? It's probably pretty high. And I suspect anybody listening, you're probably, I suspect the same, maybe a little bit lower because, you're not Jason. Jason knows how to write email. I've spent some time writing emails, but I think the opportunity is not great. To your point, what you want is the strategy, but from what I've seen, these are large language models. Like ChatGPT has the code interpreter piece, and don't get me wrong, I have taken an entire Apollo instance worth of data. I've taken sequences, fully enriched, got all the data, threw it into GPT code analyzer and said, hey, tell me what the signals are. Just couldn't find anything relevant that I couldn't find. I found some interesting things, but it took 15 minutes to do that. And it took 3 minutes for me to just look through the Apollo and go, let me look at the email replies and see what they're saying. Oh. And then let me look at the job titles.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of is the juice worth the squeeze? There are, AI does have all these abilities. I think the question to ask yourself if you're looking at this is the juice worth the squeeze? Can I do this manually better, faster? Or is this going to do it better? And I'm totally with you. Automating AI doing the copy of emails is not something that I want to automate for myself or for my team. And that kind of goes for the AI SDRs of the world as well. I've had my board member send me a few times, and I think somebody just went through YC and they're an AI SDR, and I wish them all the best. And I don't mean anything negative by this comment if they see this or if they're listening, but I just think that to Jason's point, you need to be the value in having AI is helping us gain an understanding of what has happened and what we need to do next. It's not writing the copy. And if we release these AI copy bots on the world and say, okay, go send as many emails as you want, we're just going to get in this dystopian Margaret Atwood world of a future where it's just AI speaking to AI, and Google is going to have to ratchet up the cold email barriers that much higher.
Well, yeah, I think the ultimate consequence of all of this is that Google and Outlook are going to really ratchet up and have built-in functionality. I'm already starting to see a lot of stuff. I mean, Basecamp's got their solution for it, but there's a lot of email stuff coming out that warns you when you're getting an email from someone that you have never interacted with before. There's that one tool, I can't remember what it is, where it asks, if I send an email to you and you've never had email communication, it's asked if hey, do you want to donate to my favorite nonprofit in order to get in my inbox kind of thing. I just don't think we're in a world that's too far away from that right now. The other thing that I would say with email is sentiment detection, I think is total garbage too. All the sentiment detection I've seen with transcripts and with email is very inaccurate. It's not very good at determining the tonality of a person's response, even audio recordings. I was just using a call recorder. I won't mention the name, but it's one of the 3 popular ones. And it's it has sentiment detection. It was completely off around the sentiment. Yeah. And it's what do you do with that information either? It's just, I don't know. Sentiment detection to me is like, I just want to know, did this land a meeting or not? Is what I
Yeah.
want to know. And even that ability I've seen with these tools is a little iffy. It doesn't always catch the calendar invites and, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think if you're looking for the magic pill with email, it doesn't exist right now.
Yeah. And can I throw an interesting counterpoint out to the email
Yeah.
perspective? Because I've been on the email deliverability roller coaster since 2012, and like to your point earlier, it was super easy back in the day. You could send it off your main domain, as many emails as you wanted, as long as you prepaid Google $35, when you first opened it up, so that they knew you had some money. Like it was, your deliverability was going to be really good. Then SPF, DKIM, DMARC all came into effect a few years, over the last 10 years. And those made it harder for people to spoof emails. The biggest and spoof, and it made it harder for teams to like set up their emails. And so I know a lot of teams saw like huge drops when DMARC and DKIM came out because nobody knew. And suddenly your email deliverability, all your emails are going into an inbox. The biggest change came in 2017 when Google first announced TensorFlow and using TensorFlow to guard to run their spam operations. And that's where we saw the biggest and steepest declines in reply rates, because it was not just Google throttling what goes in, it was Google throttling what's going out based on this large, I don't think it was a large language model. It was a machine learning model, use a tool called, or a tech called TensorFlow. And I think one scenario that I think is 25% chance of being true is that we've reached peak difficulty in email deliverability.
Yeah.
I think Google, I think, okay, I'll say I'm 25% confident that this is true. So I'm going to say it as if I'm confident because there's no other way to express the idea, but 25% chance that this is true, that it is going to be it was easy to get the first 80% of all the spam and junk and everything out of there. And like, I think spam's a little bit easier to eliminate because there's some very targeted keywords and there's some, people are trying to jump through hoops. Cold email is business email to a different company that's going to look identical to other company to company information. It's got an email sig, it's got a person, there's real people attached to it. It's going to be very, very hard for Google to differentiate between cold email coming from a salesperson versus a air quotes cold email coming from a prospect or a customer. Hey, Jason, Jim referred me to you. I want to buy some stuff from you. Is an email that you absolutely 100% want Google to put into your inbox. And I think there's a version of this world where it gets so hard for Google to differentiate between somebody emailing you out of the blue that you don't know, that's a prospect or a potential customer or an old contact from a previous company, that it becomes near impossible for them to differentiate between that and cold email.
Yeah. No, interesting. Because I wonder, the other thing I've thought about too is, what's the incentive for Google and Outlook to continue allowing the Outreaches and the Salesloft of the world and the Apollos of the world to even sync up with their mail server versus, I don't know if you guys have your own mail servers or whatever route that you go through to send your stuff, but what's stopping them from just shutting that down completely?
This is what because for context, I think Jason knows this, but the audience may not. I started a company similar to Outreach Salesloft back in the day. And we explored whether or not we'd have to do our own mail servers. And we feared this the whole time. We thought Google, Microsoft are going to shut this down big time. Because they have right now with Outreach and with Office 365, they've got API authentication. Like there's no janky workaround. I'm surprised that I'm surprised they let these tools use it. The short answer is there's no way that they could ever completely ban them, because if they pushed away the APIs, then what it does is all these people that are doing that already, now they have to use SMTP IMAP, and because email's an open server or an open framework, federated because it's open, you can't lock that down. you would, people will just, this is probably the most, I suspect they're doing it because if they don't allow it over the API, people will do it over SMTP IMAP, which is less secure, which invites all these security incidents. And so I wonder if it's just like they're making trade-offs of like, okay, it's a net benefit for us to allow these companies to do this securely so that we reduce the overall security situation with people enabling SMTP IMAP and just connecting otherwise. Because otherwise, it's a whole lot. You have to disable a whole lot of the security that Google enables in order to use SMTP IMAP.
What other areas are you seeing with AI that besides email that are like,
I mean, one that I've heard you talk about that you like that I don't like,
oh yeah,
is live AI sales coaching.
yeah,
And this is not a professional opinion. This is not Collin, CEO of Predictable Revenue, saying I think this is bad. This is Collin, the guy who spent 10 years in sales before I started this, and I've been in sales for a lot longer, saying I personally don't like it because I can't look at Jason. I can hardly look at Jason and look at a static document that has a single page of Google Notes and maintain the conversation. Let alone if I had, you going and then Doogie Howser screen typing right here, going do, and spitting out the like, this is how you handle that objection, and this is how you handle that, and this is how you handle that. I just don't think, and I'm sure there are people that are younger and more able to split their attention. I just don't think on a sales call with the depth of thought and the complexity of the conversations, I don't think I have the ability to make the most out of a system like that.
Yeah, the AI coaching is, so I won't mention the specific individual, but there's someone that does training and coaching that is very well known in the SaaS space. And he thinks that the future is a version of him being a sales coach, like an AI sales coach version of him. So basically taking all of his content, all this other kind of stuff, and teams could pay and sign up their reps to get AI coaching. So it's like literally someone I could like talk to on a call like this, chat back and forth. I just don't ever see that level of sophistication happening, nor would I trust that advice. I think that there's like little stuff, like if I was on a sales call and, I was just right before this on a call with a new client that sells an HR like payroll solution. They compete against all of the big payroll solutions, right? ADP, et cetera. And if someone said I was using ADP and a little prompt came up with like, battle card, here's 3 or 4 bullet points on areas where we tend to differentiate or problems where customers tend to have, or a relevant customer who switched and then why. I think that kind of stuff, I've used it a little bit with, I think Revenue IO's platform has a little bit of this built in for the call coaching around the cold call. I think if you can set what level of it that you want to pop up and it's not too distracting, it's almost like what I would envision the cockpit of a fighter jet is kind of like, where I'm being notified of things and I'm like in the moment doing the thing that I need to do, but I'm being alerted by certain things that I can take action on. I do think it would take a lot of practice, but I didn't find the experience with the platform to be very distracting as long as I could throttle back stuff that I don't want to hear. So if it's telling me what I need to ask next and what I need to do, I think that's way too much and it's not going to get good enough to do that. But if it's prompting battle cards or specific types of things like that, I think that could be pretty interesting. I don't know. I don't know if they like Revenue IO, for example. I don't know. I haven't looked recently. I don't know how much data they have to support. Like, does this work? Do reps see an increase with this? I thought it was kind of cool though. I found it useful.
I could see it being useful for a newer rep, to have things surfaced, but like for you selling Outbound Squad services, do you think you would actually use that to sell Outbound Squad right now? Being Jason, having been selling this for a few years and knowing all of that, or is there a time and a place for like a more junior rep that's trying to figure these things out?
Yeah. I would use it in a very different way, though. The part that is the hardest part for me is like with the conversational intelligence tools is that you have to set all of this stuff up. It takes a really long time to set it up.
Mhm.
So I would use the competitive battle cards piece. But I get your point. I mean, I'm not going to have like what would be really helpful for a first year SDR that's never done cold calling before is to, hey, permission based opener. It's like right there, right,
Yeah.
pops up. Boom, priority drop. Like these are the 2 talking points. Boom, for this persona.
Mhm.
I wouldn't personally want that for me, for my stuff at this point. So again, I think it's like your ability to throttle stuff on and off, I think is going to be really impactful. But is that really AI? I don't really think that that's AI. I mean,
Yeah.
it's detecting word for word transcriptions. It's pulling stuff and it's just serving up what it thinks you want. It doesn't get smarter at all or better at detecting stuff. So I don't
Yeah.
really even think that that's artificial intelligence.
It's using like large language models to understand the words. But I think to your point, like what you're talking about is just good sales planning, good
Yeah.
sales strategy of if this, then that. And like,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like we're at a point where I mean, what my original vision for Vulture CRM was, it was going to be a CRM system. It would suck your data out of Salesforce and it would compile and do all the math and then profile all your customers and then find, okay, here's a database. These are all the matching customers. Here's all your opportunities based on all of your past opportunity movement and all the things that have happened. These are the ops that are likely to close, and these are the ops that are not likely to close, and why. And like
Yeah.
the we're a step closer to that, but the level of understanding, like there's something, I haven't seen anything that's made progress on that element of understanding, right? The large language models are great at listening, or good at listening, good at diarization, which is like identifying the speakers, good at transcribing, good at telling you what was said, and then you can ask it questions about those things. But AI isn't, I don't know if it's at a place where it's understanding exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
I want to change, and let's end this and spend a bit of time talking about some maybe more positive elements here. Because I believe that these large language models are extremely helpful. And to my point earlier, I do think, like, if it's really good at listening and if it's good at filling out my admin work, why can't it fill out my medic scores? Because that's all I'm going to do is just process the conversation and then take a couple of notes. And it turns out AI is pretty good for that. And if anybody's interested, shoot me an email, Collin@predictablerevenue.com. I'll send you the prompt that I'm using I take my chorus, I fire the transcript in there, I throw this prompt in there, and then I have it do a medic assessment and like score it out for me. Like, it's easy enough to do. It takes me a few minutes. It's I do them. I have one for my medic score. I have one for a perfect call framework that we developed alongside of a customer. When I say developed, I mean they had one and I really liked it, and I changed a couple of things based on my personal preferences, and now I call it mine. And so I've got a prompt that I trained on that, so I can, basically when our customers are listening, or when we're booking meetings for our customers, then their AEs jump on, I can take that recording and score it and come out with a score on the other side very quickly, very easily. That's one of my favorites that I've done. Like I was working on that last week. I'm actively using this. I'm curious, Jason, to you, talk to me about an AI tool that you're actually using today and getting value from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just the Chat GPT, just the basic version on the website. There's a couple things for outbound that I find it to be pretty helpful for. One is if you're reaching out to publicly traded companies and you want to get into a 10K or a quarterly report. I mean, literally, the prompt is, I am a rep at XYZ company. My target persona is HR roles. They care about these 3 things, and here's how we help them. Like, make that the prompt each time. Here's a quarterly transcript. Can you help me pick out specific things from this transcript that they're focused on that we might be able to help out with? Like literally like that. And you copy and paste the transcript in, and it'll do a really good job of picking out specific things. And you can also train it too with, like, I have a customer that primarily works with companies in helping reduce their cost to serve in contact centers.
Mhm.
So that's how easy their digital platform is to use and self-serve and find manual answers. And that's also, do we have ways to push customers to answer their own questions through FAQs and chat versus picking up the phone and calling in? Because that's what they don't want people to do, is call into the contact center. And these are large companies like your Nordstroms of the world in retail, and then 10 other industry verticals. Well, if you just tell it to look for, like, tell me about any initiatives Nordstrom has from their recent quarterly report that are digital, cost reduction initiatives, web initiatives, customer experience initiatives, and you have like a list of 10 or 15 things, like it does a really good job of taking something that you could literally spend 20, 30 minutes on and help you find it in about 2 minutes.
Hmm.
I think that's the biggest thing that I have found. For non-publicly traded companies, the other thing that you could do too is if there's any investor relations pages or anything like that on websites, that's pretty money also.
Mhm.
And then lastly, in this kind of general type of area, it depends on if you have like the Bing, function turned on or not. Like you can get it to, looking at news for a company and things like that, and to tell you things that they're working on, and, things around expansion and all of the normal types of triggers that you might look for. So
Mhm.
I find that to be incredibly helpful.
I love that because one of my favorite things right now is automating the like SDR research. And I know this is kind of a cheat because it's not necessarily the only AI isn't the only thing that's happening here. I'm also cheating with a tool called Clay that's just like madman spreadsheet with 40 different integrations. But one of the cool things it can do is if you give it a list, like a company's website and their LinkedIn, it can look for news, and it
Yeah.
can look for, you can do that for a spreadsheet of 1,000 of them. And so what I'm going to do is steal Jason's idea from earlier about, hey, these are the things that I'm looking for. I can automate a search to find the 10K. I can automate a search to find the investor relations page. And then I'm going to add on and say, okay, these are the things that I'm looking for. Does this article, does this post mention any of that? And then what you can do is if you're a named account rep, or if you have a very specific market that you're working with a specific set of accounts, you can build these tools to say, okay, I'm going to scrape and look, every week I'm going to look for new signals from this set of companies. And then when something pops up that's a high priority trigger, I'm going to use that to prioritize my outreach.
Yep.
And it takes some time to get that set up. But once you do, it's DIY intent, intent that actually works.
Yeah, none of the other garbage intent that tells me that a company's looking for things and there's 1,000 people at that company. Now I got to go figure out who's looking for it. It's like, okay.
Totally agree.
I think that intent can work well for ABM, type of stuff where it's like, hey, they're looking into marketing solutions. Let me just serve some ads up in front of their entire marketing department, like LinkedIn ads and things like that. It could potentially work with that, but I've seen pretty nominal gains, even in the case studies that companies have for this, very nominal gains. But I think, yeah, research is a big one. And then the other thing too is, the very first exercise I do with a company when I start working with them is we do a messaging workshop where we create what I call a messaging matrix. And this is, hey, for this persona, what are their top priorities tend to be that we align with? What are their current solutions? How do they get the job done? What are their problems? And then what are their
Mhm.
aspirations? Now, if you have call transcripts, case studies, if you're one of those companies that are maybe early stage and you don't have a lot of case studies, you could dig through competitor case studies. One that I really liked is G2.com reviews. You can look because you can filter by like the role of the person, the size of the company. It gives you pros and cons. Like there's all kinds of little goodies like this, job descriptions, where you can just start copying and pasting a bunch of this information into Chat GPT, and it'll help you figure out like, what are these people talking about and what do they tend to care about, and help me surface patterns, for that. It's also really good at finding like direct competitors of people. And I think that's a really underrated messaging best practice, is to look at how your competitors, their go-to-market messaging, and using that as a starting point, especially from their case studies. But that's the other big time saver that I've seen. And again, this is relying on good input of data. So if I have some good input of data that I can find, in my experience, it's pretty good at finding the patterns if I tell it what I'm looking for.
Hmm. I love that. So, because I love what you're doing with the messaging. I want to, because we do something similar. We have our market fit process where we walk through the kind of three hypotheses: your targeting, need, and your solution hypotheses. And there's 5 or 6 different categories under each one. Once we have it worked out, and you can, if you look up market fit and predictable revenue, you can see we've got free templates and stuff everywhere. Basically, what we're able to do is input that data, just copy paste it into GPT and say, hey, write an email in these styles for this individual. And then you're already doing all of the work of like giving the AI enough information. It's not writing amazing emails, but what we use it for is to accelerate the amount of time it takes for us to kind of get in the flow of writing a good message. Because going 0 to 1 with a cold email is like,
So
is for
hard.
me is the hardest part. I
Yeah.
sit there with a blank page and I'm like, do I even know how to write a cold email? And I've been
Yeah.
doing this for 12 years. I've written so many cold emails, but
Yeah.
every time I sit there and I'm like, I don't even, what do I even do here? And having this prompt to say, okay, well, it's this individual, these are the 3 hypotheses kind of summarized. Here are the 5 styles that we start with. And I give the GPT like 5 different examples. 3 examples for each of the 5 styles. It's a fairly long prompt. And then say, hey, give me 3 examples of, based on this customer's attributes, give me 3 example emails that you might write in each style. And then from there, I can use that. I copy paste it into a doc and I can start wordsmithing it. And that process takes, now that I have the prompt set up, that process takes 2 minutes of like copy, paste, generate, wait for GPT, throw it in a doc. And now I'm editing pretty good messaging. It's not messaging I would ever send in a cold email campaign, but it's an amazing starting point. And it cost me 4 minutes max.
Yeah. It's this whole principle. I think that's really great with sales is it's easier to edit than to create. So, and that's why with our prospects, we want to be the ones suggesting next steps and ideas and things like that, and allowing them to correct and edit our suggestion versus asking, what's the next step here for you? Yeah, I love that piece. So you're doing a bunch of other stuff with AI that I don't know how much you're willing to share or not, how much of it is a secret, but you're doing some other cool shit too.
Yeah. I mean, like I think the account qualification models is probably is like the geekiest piece for me. And this is kind
Yeah.
of, it's an overlap of like what I talked about earlier about automating the SDR research, but effectively, if I can automate the collection of, and they call it scraping, enrichment from multiple sources. I've got a customer, they have 9 different things that they're looking for every customer, and what they want to see is they're in the SaaS financing space, and they want to look at 9 different things. And one is like CEO tenure, one is like percentage of folks in North America, one is revenue, number of employees, recent round, B2B, B2C. What is their pricing? Do they offer services? What is the breakdown of services? And what you can do is basically build a number of enrichments that will gather you that data. And then I just build a prompt that says, hey, this is my customer. This is what one of their best customers looks like for each. Here's the data. And then I can have GPT, like I've written the prompt once and it can go down. And I did it yesterday and I had it spit out. I had it look at 560 companies and say, okay, on this 9-point scale, this is these ones are good fits, these ones are not good fits. And to be able to go from, like, I was thinking about like, how would I have built this list otherwise? Like, it's so much of this is like needle in a haystack. And I'm sure the first version of the account qualification model isn't perfect, but even if you're doing this off of the description, GPT-4 can make some pretty decent inferences. And if you have the like web pilot or Bing or whatever it is enabled, you can have it scrape the company's website. And so you can say, hey, ChatGPT, here, like, this is something that anybody can do and take home right now. Enable web access so GPT can go scrape a website or visit a website. and then describe what a best customer looks like to you. Give it the name of a prospect and ask GPT if it thinks that would be a good prospect and why. That's something anybody can do. And I'm basically doing that. But I'm building in like 9 or 10 different enrichment points into that prompt. And I'm scaling it using a tool called Clay. So I can build my prompt once and then run it 1,000 times at scale. And that enables me to focus on, instead of the 1,000 companies on my list or the 26,000 sort of SaaS companies on the big list, how do I narrow it down and say, okay, let's just go after this small segment of companies? And I think stuff like that, are these like niche. Yeah, that is a great example of like using ChatGPT's ability to read and parse text and then do some very basic rudimentary analysis. And for me, that's been working. It's been one of the things that's helped us kind of double the output of our SDRs this year.
Holy shit, double the output. So it's basically removing all of the, what are some of the other things that it helps you find? So is it like stuff like hiring, compelling events?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what are some of the other points that it's helping?
Well, it has access to, all your traditional databases, right? Contact and company databases. It can do LinkedIn, and it can automate a Google search. And then from an automated, so you could do like site, predictablerevenue.com, file type PDF space, predictable revenue book, to look on our website to see if there's like a PDF of the book that we have hosted somewhere. And so you can automate those types of searches, and then you can have in the next column, you could have it scrape. You could have it visit the top search result from that query and then scrape that site. And so if you were looking for 10Ks, you could do, site, company domain, 10K file type PDF, and it would pull the first result. Then you can have it scrape and parse that and then run your prompt to find all the things.
God, I can't imagine of having a whole, if you had hundreds of reps and being able to spoon feed them all of this information.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think that's really what it's about is, my good friend guy, Dan Strauss, he used to do strat sales at Zoom Info, is great seller there. And the lesson I took away from him is like, you want your sales funnel to look more like a martini glass. It's like you want to really narrow down that top of funnel and figure out where am I just going to spend a lot of time and go very deep. And I think that's another kind of use case, is the prioritization. It's so hard to break into an account through calling, emailing, whatever other creative stuff that you want to do. Is let's just make sure at least that I'm playing the odds here and putting all this effort into where I'm most likely to get a favorable outcome based on things that I could find, but that I don't like, that there's just literally not enough time in the day for me to find. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's I agree. It's prioritization is absolutely the number one thing that we're using it for. And I should caveat that it's not the only thing that we did that helped us double the output of our SDRs. It was one of the things. It was, I'd say, three major pillars. It was that for prioritizing the right accounts. It was another tool for basically automating and finding all the direct and mobile numbers, and then a parallel dialer like Orem. And those three things, if you're able to replicate that stack, you could probably double the output of your SDR team, as long as they're properly trained and you have a good idea of who your target account list should be. But back to our previous conversation, that's the number one thing that I think companies struggle with. And I haven't seen anything that has been able to automate that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Even the mobile numbers, like you're talking about, where it's like I can take a list of prospects with email addresses and say, hey, I want you to look through Zoom Info, Lead IQ, Apollo, whatever other sources, because no one data source has it all. People are always using a mix. It's like automating that. Like, think about the large organizations that I work with, these enterprise orgs, they have teams of sales ops people that are being paid pretty high salaries to like build lists, basically.
Yeah. And that's not a fun job if you're that sales ops person, to like go through and do the list over and over again. Yeah. This Clay tool can do that. You automate it, it waterfalls it through 6 different providers on the email side, and then it'll validate it with zero bounce and then push it through. And then you can do the same thing on the phone side. There's no phone call or like phone validation, but yeah.
Ooh, that would be next level, dude. AI that could do validated phone numbers.
Or yeah, I mean, could you imagine? Do you know Ryan Reiser?
Yep.
Love Ryan. His bucket system, his cold call
Yep.
scripts. That guy knows what he's talking about. I wonder if he ever gets to a point. So for those that don't know Ryan, but what he does is like he's got a team in the Philippines, and they call you give them a prospect list. They call that company at night, and they work their way through the phone tree. And their goal is to find direct numbers that lead directly to your prospects. And so it's like $1, or I don't know, it's probably a couple bucks or whatever. It's a dollar amount per number dialed, and then you get like a certain hit rate of the direct numbers. And like it can be incredible to go from a list of 1,000 to a list of 300, where you know that every time I make a dial, I'm going to connect because, you know, I'm dialing a direct line this time. And I wonder if Ryan will be able to do something like that with AI, just power dialing through the phone trees at night.
Yeah.
Phone tree navigator, Jason, let's start it. We'll get Ryan involved.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. It's like the game is, God, I wonder what's next after this, because the game right now is just like we're just trying to squeeze as much juice as we can out of this already pretty dry piece of fruit. You know, it's like we
Yep.
have to have dialers now in order for someone to be effective on the phone. What happens when we churn through all of that data? You know, I'm just kind of curious what the outbound game looks like in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with Tyler's, like if you're renewing the phone numbers, like you could be with Chorus, you can, or not Chorus, Orem, you drop all the phone numbers and you get new ones every month or every
Yeah.
week. You can just keep dialing and it's always a different number. So the prospect only knows somebody's trying to reach them, not
Yeah.
it's the same person over and over and over again.
Well, I wonder what the pickup rates are by generation. It's got to be getting lower, especially Gen Z coming up.
Mm.
I can't imagine there's a high pickup rate.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I guess it also is going to depend on like if they are working from home like we are, or if they're working in an office. Because once
Yeah.
you work in an office and you've got that desk phone and you've got your company phone number, it's a little bit of a different phone culture, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
been a while since I've worked in a big company though. So I don't know. Maybe it isn't just like star 2148 to dial, you know, Leanne in tech to get you some more RAM or something like that. But I think it is a great place to leave it. I'm curious, you know, throw us a comment. Thank you all for listening. Throw us a comment on where you think this industry is going next. What do you think? If there's any tools that we missed that you like or don't like, let us know in the comments. Thank you all for listening. Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show. If people are looking to get in touch with you because they're like, hey, I've got a sales team, I've got a bunch of SDRs, they need some training, I want them to learn from Jason, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah. Outboundsquad.com is the best place. So I work mostly with AE teams these days. So people focused on self-sourcing, multi-threading, discovery, demos, that sort of stuff. So if you're looking for any help or free resources outboundsquad.com, excuse me, is the best place to go.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for being on the show today. And thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everybody for